Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our forum titled Building Beyond Borders Rethinking Industrial Development in Central Luzon.
We are very thrilled to have all of you join us tonight as we explore the evolution of Philippine industrial policy and its lasting impact on Central Luzon's key industries.
Our goal tonight is to understand not just what policies were implemented, but whether these developments were the result of deliberate planning or reactive responses to change, and what this means for Central Luzon moving forward.
And so, to officially open our program, let us welcome our STS1 advisor, Professor Remy De Leon, for the opening remarks.
Hello, I hope my audio is okay. Um, Welcome to the latest of the Bangkulala Science and Technology Policy Forums at UP Clark. This one focusing on industrial policy in Central Luzon. It is organized by the Mapulon Group. Congratulations to the group. The group, by the way, is named after a local constellation term. The term Mapulon is the term for the constellation Pleiades. And this is a class on science, technology, and society. So why is a class on science, technology, and society doing a forum on industrial policy? Well, science, technology, and society, of course, explores the interconnections between science and technology and society. And obviously, you cannot separate society from economics. So therefore, implicit in the discussion is the study of science and technology and economics. And if indeed he who does not study history is doomed to repeat it, as the saying goes, then we are compelled to study science and technology in relation to economic history. And specifically, since UP Clark is in Central Luzon, we are paying particular attention right now to Central Luzon's economic history, given that there isn't that much literature widely available on the topic. So the hope here is that we will be able to make the output of this forum available to the public. This is, of course, I'm not sure if it's live streamed right now, but we hope to stream it. Um, yeah. We are currently entering a time of great confusion, both in the world and in the local, in the world and in the nation, in our local region, and we are confronted with many questions. And if we are to address these questions, it's going to be important to study how history has played out in the past and to look at things that might have gone wrong, things that went right, and how we can move forward together, regardless of our points of view, and work together towards more inclusive and more scientifically literate Central Luzon, more scientifically literate Philippines, and a better world in general. Um, yeah, that is why we are meeting today, and I'm very glad to welcome our two speakers for today, and I'm very glad to see that the group has successfully managed to bring such illustrious experts to be with us tonight. Thank you very much, and with no further ado, let's proceed to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Prof. Remy, for that thoughtful message to start our discussion.
Now, let's get to know our distinguished speakers who will guide us through this important conversation.
For our general discussion on industrial policy, we have Sir Aris Zoleta, a PhD student at the LSU Graduate School of Economics, and currently works as a consultant at Asian Development Bank. Sir Aris will provide us with an overview of Philippine industrial policy.
For the industry specific discussions, we are joined by Mr. Rion Carion from Texas Instruments, who will share his insights on the semiconductor industry.
And of course, Mrs. Remy Bacani Timbol from the Party Council of Outsourcing Companies in Pampanga and head of BPOs under Clark Investors Allocators Associations for 2025-2026. She is also currently an executive at Weeks Flex Workspace Business Solutions and Professional Business Outsourcing Global Limited and Uplift Work Services. She works under the Office of the President at Wesleyan University of the Philippines, based in Cabanatuan City. And of course, she also owns a management and consulting company called Tixani Management OPC. She is representing the BPO industry.
We are truly honored to have you all with us tonight.
And of course, to begin our forum proper, let's please welcome Sir Aris Zoleta, who will discuss the evolution of Philippine industrial policy and how these strategies have shaped regional development.
But before we begin, quick reminder that if you have any questions for our speaker, you may type them in the Zoom chat box or raise your hand to be acknowledged. Please take the floor, Sir Zoleta.
Hi, thank you so much, Trish, for inviting me with this wonderful seminar on industrial policy. Would you mind to share the PowerPoint presentation for me, please? So, by the way, for those who don't know me, my name is Aris Soleta. I'm currently working as a macroeconomist for the Asian Development Bank. Prior me joining to Asian Development Bank, I also have 12 years experience in investment banking with State Street Bank and JP Morgan and Chase, and also I have almost a year experience with the Department of Finance last 2024. So, but before I start with my talk, I would like to have a short disclaimer. Views expressed to this seminar is of the authors and not of those of the others, like Asian Development Bank, its governors, and its managers. So anyway, so I have what you call this, have these two hearts parted whether I should make it a little bit technical or make it a little bit not. But I guess this is really not an academic forum, but more of a practical applications of industrial policy. So I go towards to a much more, practical sense. And I really enjoy if you could ask question at the end or in the middle of the seminar. That will be okay with me. So by the way, the title that I will be presenting today is Industrial Policy in AI and Uncertainty, Trade Uncertainty Era. Next slide, please. By the way, also would like to have a disclaimer. Also work with the National University of Baliwag. So this is my view and not of those of them. So what is industrial policy? So basically, in the Philippine context, that's quite difficult to define in at least in a legal sense or in an operational sense. But basically, if you look at industrial policy in the way that the government should operate, it mainly divides into two different departments. But I would say primarily it will work with what we call the Department of Trade and Industry, but also the DevDev or the former NEDA, DBM, DOF, and other agency also have some sort of feel and sense of industrial policy. But mainly, when we talk about industrial policy, we talk about the Department of Trade and Industry. But of course, there were other segments of the sectors like agriculture who have industrial policy, but it will go fall under DA. But primarily, the architecture of the industrial policy will fall mainly on the Department of Trade and Industry. So since that we don't have macroeconomic transformation and industrial policy, we don't have such limited definition. Let's go back to the what we call theoretical definition at least, right? So according to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, industrial policy is the term used to describe government intervention domestic industry against market forces through subsidies, taxes, policies, and more to foster certain sectors in the company. So the idea is that the government should have set of rules and policy that will intervene in the market, right? So I know if you are done with your micro and intro econ classes, this is something that the classical economics will not say. So the laissez-faire, right? So let the private market do its job and promote growth, but that's actually not true in some sense. Sometimes the market fails, sometimes the market won't interact in a way that we wanted the social outcomes. That being said, the government should intervene and lead the economy to an outcome that is desirable. So that is industrial policy in a nutshell. So next slide, please. So let's talk about this industrial policy in some sense here. Okay, so I will be trying to really not to put names, because sometimes this stuff will becoming very politicized, right? Because we're talking certain policy and criticize them. But let's talk about dates. So post-war industrial policies in the 1950s focuses on protectionism and generous government incentives. So ano ibig sabihin nun? So the government trying to protect local industry, right? During the reconstructions after the post-World War II. So this is the pre Ferdinand Marcos era, okay? Where this is the Magsaysay and the post-war era in which we wanted to protect our industry. Then, that being said, the logic is that we wanted to put barriers of foreign imports. So we wanted to be, quote, air quotes, self-sufficient. And we provide generous incentives for this industry to grow. So what happens afterwards in 1980s, the government embarked trade liberalization program to reduce tariff and non-tariff. So the 1980s was a quite different era. By the way, the 1950s continues in the 1970s with the Marcos regime. Okay, so the Marcos regime, 1972, right, the martial law era. So the 1950s and 1970s have this strong protectionism and generous government incentive. We know that the 1970s era of the Marcos senior era is really more of a protection, and not because of whether a certain industry is productive. As long as you could extract resources from this firm, then that will be protected. So this is like what we call nepotism, some sort of sense, right? So that's one of the most terrible part of our history that I hope all of you will have been reminded. That's not the golden age. That's the worst part of our our economy. We are on that brink of course. But after that, the core administrations, there's a little bit of change of heart. So there's privatizations. There is having less participation of government in terms of economic and macroeconomic outcomes. So 1980s, they start to remove some of the barriers of trade. Then that being said, in the 1990s, that is where we have a full-blown talk with the rest of the world. So if you know GATT, I hope you know GATT. The meaning of GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades of the World Trade Organization. In the 1990s, China was not there yet, by the way. So it's the Philippines and the rest of the world. So this is the Ramos administration. I was elementary during that time. Then when they're talking about and promoting about what is the benefits of international trade. That's the reason why the topics that we had is uncertainty on trades, right? So I hope you have this international macro, because that will be very helpful to understand what's the sense of the talk. So World Trade Organization. Then on the 20s, this is where the China boom comes in, right? So we further integrate ourselves to the rest of the world. In particular to our key goal of what we call the ASEAN Economic Community. In the 2000s, we have the associations of Southeast Asian nations, and we envision to what we call the common trade bloc. So ano ibig sabihin ng common trade bloc? So you know European unions, right? Where you could move along the Eurozone without having issues in terms of trade, in terms of, for example, I am a physician. I could go to, if I'm from UK, back then you could move to Hungary, and there's no additional barriers. And we start to liberalize our thinking and trying to form that vision of a one ASEAN community. like now we enjoy that benefit. So I hope you have appreciated that. So when I travel to different countries in Southeast Asia, okay, uh, for example, I've been in Indonesia last time in Bali to a central bank conference. I don't have to, provide any additional documents. I just have to provide my passport, and I could entry to the country, and that likewise, those people from Indonesia could enter the Philippines without additional barriers. But beside the ASEAN Economic Community, ASEAN as a country, or rather ASEAN as an economic bloc, also have what we call free trade agreements with other countries. That's the reason why there's what we call ASEAN plus 3, right? So last time, previous week or this week, the president of the Philippines, together with the Association of Southeast Asian Nation, plus the Timor Leste, and plus the other three economic countries like China, Japan, and South Korea, have been talked with the US, with the Philippines, with ASEAN regarding to a free trade agreement. Of course, US has been there as an observer to the talk. So this is how we have the evolution. But what happening now is we're seeing the US getting away from that perspective of globalization. And I don't know if you have watched the video YouTube interview with Jeremy Sack, which is a great what you call this an international macroeconomist. What he's saying is that what's happening now is really against all economic theories and all of the benefits of the trade. Next slide, please. So when we talk about apologies, but I have to open my computer because this is quite small for me. I'm using my device, by the way. So when we're talking about economic industrial policy, we should talk about how we as a country evolve. And as industrial policy, it comes to the sense that we wanted to make majority of the share of our growth are coming from industry and from manufacturing instead of agriculture. So the data that you're seeing is actually from Aldaba et al. This is a slide that shows you the growth of each sector. So there's a sector in agriculture, industry, manufacturing and services, and including their subsectors. If you would have noticed, majority in 2021 and 2023, majority of our growth are coming from this what we call services sectors. If you would have noticed, the growth of agriculture is lessened. So again, JC Punong Bayan have pointed out this quite vividly. The notion that the Philippines is an agricultural country is totally not true. Because if that is the case, then that being said, the agriculture share of GDP should be larger, even at least the growth rate. But if you would have noticed this slide, something that you would have noticed is that consistently agriculture share is declining, and services are actually accelerating. On the other hand, manufacturing is actually a little bit increasing, so there's still hope. But majority of the growth in terms of subsector, it's coming from services sector, and the GDP on average are actually increasing of 6.3%. But in order for us to move from a middle income countries to upper middle income countries, we have to have a consistent growth of approximately 7 up to 10%. To be honest, something that I still remember and experience a very high GDP growth rate is during the Arroyo administration, which we have the 11% growth rate after they have increased the value-added tax, I believe. Out of the top of my head, I think that's the one that I remember, that we have the highest GDP growth rate. But as an industrial policy, the idea is that we wanted to accelerate the growth of the economy into a higher growth year for year. So we must have a consistent of 7% or 6% or 8% and 9% in order for us to move the living standard of the country. That being said, in other words, we wanted to lift up many of our citizens out of poverty. Okay? So that's the idea. That's the reason why the government wanted to intervene to the economy, because they wanted that growth to be maximized. So the next slide, please. So economic structures for industrialization. So again, if you wanted to be considered as an industrialized country, majority of your GDP should be coming from manufacturing or services sector. And if you would have showing on this slide again, it is showing that majority, 61% of our economy, 61.4% are services sector. Actually, this is something that I want you to really do your own assignment with, because this is something that are actually what you call this. We call it leapfrogging. What happened to the Philippines is that we have this strong services sector, especially the BPO, IT BPO sector, and then we outlive manufacturing and agriculture. In other nations, if you go to the development economics theory, the growth path must be agriculture, industry, manufacturing, then services. But what happened to the Philippines is that we trajected our structure of economy move to the services sector without making a strong manufacturing and agriculture base. So that is something happened to us. I always tell that to my students at Sambeda as well, that this is something that is not actually peculiar, but this is something that happens to the Philippines, that we're move our growth path, intended or unintended, from becoming a manufacturing-based economy into a service-based economy. So there's a problem and there's a pros and the cons with that. But as of now, from 2021 up to 2023, 61% of our GDP is actually produced from the services sector. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next slide that you will be seeing again is just the summary of the previous one. So ideally, is that if you have this productive sector, then in economics, if you have a more productive sector and less productive sector, more productive firm, less productive firm, the idea is what we call a push and pull factor. So a push or a pull factor is that those who are productive sectors should be grown and should be cherished and should be attracting more employment in order for it to grow more. So at least in the very basic neoclassical growth model, that should happen. But if you look at here, this is the share of employment among these four major sectors of the economy: agriculture, industry, and manufacturing and services sectors. If you look at, there's an evolution. 50%, 21 to 2023, majority again of our employment are coming from services sector. So imagine your IT BPO, your call centers, but not only them, of course, you have the Grab services, the lawyers, the ITs, the academics, the nurses. All of these are on the services sector. The food and services, for example, restaurant, tourism, and etc. These are majority of our growth. So there were, I would say, in my own opinion, two major push. The reason why we have the service sector as majority of our GDP is for tourism. We're becoming more attractive to tourists. I hope so. It will continue. I'm not saying we're the best, but what I'm saying is that there were a change in which we become visible to the global stage. And the IT BPO sector that happens around the 1990s, especially when they make it more possible for foreigners or foreign firms to set up their IT BPO sectors. So I was part of that actually. Just a side note, in 2009 I graduated in agriculture. Then in 2010 I was hired by way back before it's called Clark. I forgot that name, but that's actually it's actually now a Lorica, I believe. That's in Pilexel, in MA Rojas. So I was actually Kapampangan in some sense, because I live in Mabalacat for almost 3 to 4 years of my life. So that's a big chunk of job. And if you're looking at, but I don't want to really go ahead with the discussion, and some of our colleagues in the what you call this, in the industry will show you what Clark is probably, and what's something beautiful with Clark and how it will attract more investors. And I will not spoil you with that. They will tell you that, and I'm happy to just give you the overall. By the way, so let us see here. So manufacturing contributions to GDP. So again, the idea is that majority of our growth or majority of the GDP should be from the manufacturing. But if you were looking at here, the Philippines is actually the lowest, if not. Here's the Philippines. Look at that. So around 15% or around 19% of our GDP is coming, contributions are coming from manufacturing. But look at other countries like South Korea or Indonesia, right? Nakalulungkot lang when I see the news, and I'm really not surprised, but I'm saddened with how the Vietnam are actually surpassing the Philippines just for 10 years. Just for 10 years, by the way. As working for the Asian Development Bank, I really don't have what you call bias about which countries, but as a Filipino, I have this heart for the Philippines. But as a policy analyst, you know, the Vietnam government have done a tremendous work, and I applaud them for surpassing from the least among the second tier ASEAN members to surpass other ASEAN 5 countries in terms of uh, their GDP growth and their GDP or their macroeconomic outcomes to be better than us. But again, this is a challenge for us as a Filipino. How can we do better? I hope so we could do better. So manufacturing contribution to employment. Again, the idea is that we should have more share to the manufacturing, but again, in the Philippines, that's around 6 to 7% only in 2022. So we're still not on other countries who have. Imagine, look at Malaysia, almost 24% of their population working force are in manufacturing in 2000s. It's declining. And look at this country. Who's this country? And surprisingly, or even not surprisingly, that is Vietnam. Sometimes nagtataka na ako. I mean, this really nagtataka. This is really good academic questions here. Do democratic countries produce good economic outcomes? I think there's some research on that. And that is something that I would like it to be founded for. The socialist countries like China, Vietnam, and others could be a good way of an economic models. Again, that is an academic curiosity. I'm not saying that it should be, but again, that's an academic question. Okay, so how trade uncertainty will impact the Philippines? So when I would like to quickly share, again, I am not very keen, I would say, not in tune always with the Philippine data because I'm working with South Asia. I'm the macroeconomist for South Asia, so I monitor macroeconomic variables for South Asian economies. And my colleagues in Asian Development Bank is monitoring the Southeast Asian countries. But basically, how you could measure your exposure to trade uncertainty is by looking at the share of export or trade as percentage of GDP. Imagine in 2000s we are higher, then in 2002 we are declining. So there's a cost and there's benefits of being a lower with that. For example, here in the Philippines, we're always saying that we're not full exposure. Yeah, this trade uncertainty is somehow moderate, but sector is specific, or rather, because in international trade, there's what we call HS code that measures the sector level or the product level. One of the most exposed sector, I would say, to the Philippines is what we call the garment sector. I recently made a white paper report for South Asia, and we look at what happening is that China's garment industry are becoming less productive, less costly. The question is who will be next China? And apparently, based on my research, at least in the South Asia context, India is the most good candidate. And for Southeast Asia, I think it will be Vietnam. So it's not the Philippines because we are more costly. We are not that much productive. And the next slide, I will show you that. Okay. So this is the next slide. Again, this is garment industry. So minimum wage and productivity in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. So looking at the x-axis, yep. So the x-axis is your minimum wage in dollars terms, and the y-axis is your productivity level. And look at the Philippines. We are the most expensive. If you are on the lower right quadrant, you are not on the good spot. Indonesia and the Philippines are on a good spot because their productivity level is low in average, and they're also one of the most expensive. So garment wise, at this a case study, we are not good at that. But who is good at that? Look at Vietnam. Look at Thailand. Thailand, for example, is 257. Is their actually the bubble shows you the larger the bubble is, the larger is the sales. Okay, the size of the bubble is the sales of that particular firm. So this is garment firms. And look at those countries. Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam is one of the good candidates because they have high share of productivity level, and they're kind of, not so much expensive compared to other countries. So I think this doesn't include China. It does, right? I believe so. I think this does not have China, but on other research, I have China. So this is one way. As a case study, this is something that we're not good at. So why we are still focusing on garment industry? So international trade dictates if you're not productive doing this, then move out to other sectors. I think one of the things that we're very, very good, extremely good at is two things: semicon, export, and service export, which is our BPO sector. I know there's a lot of uncertainty over to this Trump policy, but that is the two key sectors that we are over good, super good. That is the semicon and the BPO sector. But I hope later on I will share you some of the problem with the BPO and with the Gen AI. So next slide, please. So again, how does the Philippines able to capture more investment abroad? So again, industrial policy means you have to make your firm more productive. How can you make your more firm productive? And again, look at this graph. So this is the employment and labor productivity share. So you must be on the right quadrant and the upper left quadrant in order for you to be good. So how do you interpret this graph? So in this graph, there is high numbers of jobs being created to the economy. But the problem, these jobs are being created are not much productive. Yikes, that's not good. So this is the sweet spot. What it does mean is that these countries, Malaysia in particular, China, and I think this is Qatar. Okay, and this is this in this country is this is Israel. So this is the Philippines. Okay, so in these countries they are higher, they're generating more employment at the same time. That employment being generated is a quality employment because it does produce more goods. It's more productive. So as a country, that is something that we have to do. And one thing that I always shared to my students and to colleagues, I just recently come from fiscal policy conference with the Department of Budget and Management. Some of the talks that we have is that how come that we neglect the share of education on the budget share? Because by constitution, the education must have a good share or a large shares of what you call this of the GA General Appropriation Act, and the the discussion goes to the Department of Budget and Management should have a proactive voice over to the priority on what must be inside on the GAA. Again, this is really a separate topic on political economy, but the panel is saying is that the Department of Budget Management as an executive branch should check what the the Congress have inputted onto the GAA, and even the president should have the power to veto some of the item lines on the GAA. So, but anyway, what I'm driving point is that majority share of our budget is instilled on our constitutions to education because educations will translate to higher productivity. But anyway, there's still more time for us to think about this. And as a citizen, as a country, what should we do in order to correct these anomalies? Okay, so we will move over to a set of what you call this, a next slide, We will move to another set of challenges in this, what we call the generative AI. So I've been recently part of a conference in Bank of Canada in Ottawa. We're talking about generative AI and how this will impact the economies, how this will impact central banking, and etc. So if you look at this slide, these are actually some of the characteristics, and I would say we are still on this 2.0, 2.0, or even 1.0 production. And I hope I'm not correct. Please correct me to those who are in the industry. I'm not really much aware to those this type of production methods, but these are classification, digital production technology. For example, in China, they have what we call a ghost factory. So what ghost factory meant is that there will be less people who are operating the factory, but most of that is automated or even Gen AI. So this is the definition. Then next slide, please. So how do we prepare as a country? Anyway, in some sense, we are on a moderate level, so good thing. But look at those yellow part here. So there are those who are not invested so much in AI. And sometimes we talk about AI as just Chat GPT. So Chat GPT is really one part of the AI segment. So when I was working with Asian Development Bank, started to work with Asian Development Bank, I don't know how to code Python. I don't know how to code this and that. But because of Gen AI like Chat GPT, it increases my productivity level. I know how to do Python. I know how to do Julia, and then Gen AI helped me, corrected my code, my Python code. And that is something that you as a student should take advantage with. So there's a study which says that AI actually decreased critical thinking of students. I agree with that research. When during our time, I'm really struggling with this. My age, during our time, we don't have this Gen AI. We don't have this cell phones or internet. We really literally go to the library and figure out what is the sense of this by going to different manuscript and etc. Now it's becoming more productive to doing research, right? There's Gen AI, there's different tools for you to help. And what does Gen AI mean? So Gen AI is a two-sword. It increases productivity level of the firms, but it also distracts some of the job. So the Nobel Prize winner for economics this year, they have what we call the creative destruction. Ano ibig sabihin nun? So the economy, this is not really a new notion, but it's just being reinforced by these economists. The economy should destroy jobs that are not productive, and it should institute new jobs that are actually productive and that are being produced. And that being said, the transition from the old way of manufacturing, which is analog, to Gen AI, AI-driven manufacturing, there will be jobs that will be obsolete. There will be jobs that will be enhanced. So not this 2025 October East Asia and the Pacific jobs report by World Bank, but the 2024, if you read that paper, there is a graph there. I think it's figure 3 or figure 4, if I could remember. There's a matrix that shows automations and adaptations. So there's a set of skill sets, like for example, creative, that will become easy to be replaced because now Gen AI could create something for you. Music, okay, high cognitive work. Of course, there were some works that are not easily can be replaced. For example, as an economist, I am an economist, right? So my job is really easy to be replaced, right? But if you look at economists as a whole, there were a subset of economists that's hard to replace. For example, macroeconomists. I myself, for example, I am narrowed into macroeconomists. As a macroeconomist, I have much narrower point of research, which is the SGE modeling. And that's really hard to replicate. I think in the Philippines, there's only few people who's doing this type of research, SGE modeling. And if Gen AI somehow were able to produce it, I will be replaced, right? So as a student, you have to think about after I graduated, is this the job that will be replaced, or this is the job that I could be enhanced with or leveraged with? And as a government, there must be a policy that backing up our ideas and aspirations to move into an economy that is AI prepared. The problem is that we didn't invest a lot with this, right? So So when I was in the Department of Finance, I was on the labor sector. So this is the thing that we're talking about, the what we call the AI roadmap. And we always share about our aspirations. And I hope the NEDA or the DevZev will be becoming more successful into the endeavor to create the what we call the AI center. Okay, so this is uncertainties for us. Trades, I would say trade uncertainty is less of a problem because something that's we have something to play part of it. But the problem is this Gen AI and AI adaptations are really very uncertain. There's a lot of things that's happening. Last time we have Gemini, then they will replace a new model. Then we need to talk about uh, energy security, fuel security. And one thing that I raised with the conference is that yes, there's some benefits for this Gen AI. What is the cost? Who will be paying for the cost? Right? So Gen AI is not a free lunch. Who will paying for the cost of anxiety for people? Who will paying for the cost of producing the energy? Who will be paying for the cost to those who are replaced? Who will be giving pension and etc. So there's a social cost for this Gen AI, and that is an uncertainty. That's something that's a country we should aspire. But the problem is at the end of the talk, we're still the next slide is we're still stuck with this, right? We're being fascinated as a country with the drama in the Senate and in the Congress. And I hope this will show to them if there's a flood control politicians, right to jail. Nepo baby, right to jail. Right? Corrupt politicians, right to jail. Corrupt local government employee, right to jail. Diba? Sana ganun, no? But so far, as a country, we're still not moving forward with this. Diba? At the end of the day, all of this industrial policy is in a political economy. If the government are really dedicated or really uh, doing the right heart of pursuing this, there must be cases built at this very moment. There must be less talk on TV and radio about who's who's. There must be papers being filed. There must be persecuted, and etc. Again, let's talk this on our heart and say, flood control politicians, right to jail. Okay, thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And if you have a question, I'm more than happy to answer that. If you have stupid question, right to jail. No, I'm just joking. There's no stupid question. Everything is welcome, by the way.
Okay, thank you so much, Sir Zoleta, for that very enlightening and interesting presentation. So now we open the floor for questions. So please, everyone, if you have any question for Sir Zoleta, please feel free to open your mic or send a question in the Zoom chat box.
We have our first question from Mix Amado. So for Sir Zuleta, in light of global demand and logistical insecurities, if we indeed want to develop local industrial production, say in steel or shipping or consumer electronics, is there a way to grow these industries while targeting mostly local rather than export markets?
Okay, that's a great question. No? Salamat sa pagtatanong yan. So again, if you were asking me as a Filipino, I wanted to do as much as possible to do it locally. Okay, but the problem is that as a teacher of economics, I will go to what I've been teaching. Right, economic theory suggests that I really don't want to lecture you guys with this, but Jeremy Sack pointed this out clearly. Is that as a country, we are not working as an individual island. The Philippines will not always create the best product at the lower cost. For example, rice. Let's say rice, for example. Aren't you know that rice is the most subsidized crop in the Philippines? But we cannot be rice secure whatsoever because India is the largest exporter of rice and they are actually producing it almost a quarter of our cost. Again, what I'm not saying is that we should not strive independence. But what should build a society as a globally is this system in which a country who's producing these goods at the lower cost will allow to produce it and then manufacture it and then export it to countries who are not producing it less, vice versa. So this is economic trade. And that being said, going back to your question, of course, there is a move for global orders in which the being what you call this again. This is a political economy uh, answer. There's a move of the U.S. to move away from China-centric Asia into US-centric Asia. That being said, they created Japan, Australia, I believe, and the Philippines of what we call the trilateral agreement to build what we call the Luzon Economic Corridor. I hope you heard about that. So that includes Clark, that includes Subic, that includes Batangas, and they will create a wider pre-port zone. I think this is really not an old idea, by the way. This is an idea coming from Arroyo administration. So he divided the countries into different regions, and then let's create an industry based on what the region would produce. So that's an Arroyo thinking as an economist. Let's say, setting aside corruption and whatsoever, Arroyo is really a good economist, by the way. He's a really smart economist. He's really a good economist. And again, I will not say something that against economic theory. In my point of view, if we're good at producing semicon, let's produce more semicon. If we're not good at producing rice, let's not stop having this policy of subsidizing rice because we cannot produce more. Again, but let's have a level of confidence that if so happen that they will stop selling us rice, we have this backup plan where we could purchase the rice, or we could have grown the rice on our end. Again, that's being said, again, in per hectareage, in aggregate level, we cannot produce enough rice for us. That being said, that's the reason why we import rice. And that's the purpose of RCEP, Rice Competitive Enhancement Fund. Again, going back to your question, I think that's a good answer today. I hope I answer your question. Who asked that question? Amado, Sabio? I think that's one question that I could answer. Any question?
On to the next question from Nix Angelo Fabros. If you could change one major decision in our industrial history, what would it be and why?
Oh, good question. So if I could be the president of the Republic of the Philippines, right? I will build what China built. So remember, China is a communist country, right? So that being said, they have this change of heart. They are actually a pure Marxist country. That's a strong form of communism and socialism. Lahat talaga doon pag-aari ng gobyerno. So imagine the former USSR, Soviet Union. It's a planned economy. And history dictates they failed miserably. The Marxist theory, in some sense, central economy, failed miserably. And I forgot the name of that policymakers from China, Deng Xiaoping, I believe. They moved from Marxist, okay, into the Stalin form of communism. Let's have a half-half, okay? And Vietnam copied this. So what China did is that there is an island, there's two systems, one country. So they created these multiple economic hubs. Within these economic hubs, you are following capitalism. But outside economic hubs, you're following the communist rule. So ano ibig sabihin nun? What I'm driving is that we have to create more free-port zone like Clark. We have to invest more on producing more free-port zone like Clark, Aurora, then I think there's one in Bataan. So this is where the Central Luzon is really good at. We have so many. The problem with Central Luzon is we're not effective in attracting, we didn't find our strength. That's the reason why look at Calabarzon. Look at Santa Rosa. They're attracting more manufacturing, right? But this is the time for Clark to absorb some of the spillover from Calabarzon, because Calabarzon is already full pack of manufacturing and industry and highly urbanized. And that must spill over to other region. That being said, the next candidate and the next step is making Central Luzon the next Calabarzon. That being said, within the Central Luzon region, Angeles City, what I'm proposing, I would say, if I would be the president, probably I would say, I will create the Metro Manila in Central Luzon. So I will call it Metro Clark. This is what I'm imagining. Mabalacat City, Angeles City, in some extent San Fernando, Bamban and Capas, create a larger political entity. We call it Metro Clark, that will replicate the the ideals or the system that being done with Santa Rosa, probably, and that will accelerate further. I think that's one thing that on top of my head as if I will become the president. But LEC, that must be done, that must be supported. Luzon Economic Corridor, that must be pushed forward in full throttle.
Thank you so much, Sir Aris. There is another question from Mix Clarence Salonga. Which sectors of our industries do you think should be prioritized for the Philippines to gain more profit?
Oh, that's a good question. Which sectors? Really? Okay. In terms of something that's laggard that we could potentially be do good do more is actually in mining. But the problem with mining is that we have this aversion with environmental risk. So mining done responsibly will produce more goods for the society. So imagine this AI boom will require this what we call rare earth metal. And there's only few countries in the world that possesses the ability to produce rare earth metals. And surprise, surprise, the Philippines is one of them. Actually, we have also other metals are also one of the largest reserve. Mining is one. The other is industry. We should have strengthened our BPO sector, in particular to banking. I have this discussion with regulators. I would say this is really not on a policy forum, but on friends discussion. One of the things that we are very good at is what we call BPO. In some sense, this is what we call the banking. Singapore is becoming more expensive. Hong Kong is becoming more expensive. Politically, it's unstable because of this China thing. Singapore. So the next step is making the BGC or Metro Clark the next Singapore in some sense. So imagine JP Morgan is the largest bank in the world. And you know what? What they choose as their regional hub in in Asia? It's the Philippines. There's two sites, one in Cebu, one in Manila. I think that's in combined it's approximately 20,000 employees. So if we could have this BPO sector, because at the end of the day, call center jobs will be replaced by AI. We are. I'm not being racist, by the way. The advantage in call center is our accent. I could fake accent in several ways. Naturally, Filipinos have neutral accent, so we could be a Caucasian, we could be a British, or we could Australian or Canadian, Southern accents in the US or Northern accent in the US. But again, India and other countries have very strong accent. But that comparative advantage will be lessened to the Philippines because India now can match their accent, right? We say or even totally replace the people itself could have generated AI agent who would take call and queries. That being said, the next step of this BPO, I hope our BPO speaker will agree, is to move over from this general thing into what we call banking, like HSBC and etc., putting up their shop here. So there's a lot of back office jobs for this banking that I envision to be here in the Philippines. Another thing that are growing but are actually less regulated and must be somehow looked at by the industry is what we call this virtual assistance thing, right? Work from home. So there were some way of abuse and some way of less regulation. I'm not saying that it should be regulated, but this is something that we have to, talk about. So again, in summary, on top of my head, I think it's really banking industry and in mining industry, in agriculture in some extent, but on very specialized craft.
Apologies to those who want to send their questions. Due to limited time, due to time constraints, we will be moving on to the next portion of our following. Although if we have extra time later, we can use that time for Q&A.
Thank you to everyone who shared their thoughts and questions. And once again, thank you, Sir Zoleta, for your valuable insights. Of course, to express our appreciation, we'd like to present the Certificate of Appreciation to Sir Aris Zoleta for sharing his expertise with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Sir Zoleta. We hope to continue learning from your work in the field of industrial policy.
Moving on, we now turn our attention to one of Central Luzon's fastest growing sectors, the business process outsourcing or BPO industry.
To talk about its growth trajectory and policy drivers, please welcome Ms. Remy Bakatni Timbol.
Hi, can you please raise your hand or give me a heart sign if you have any family member or if you have any parents who work in the outsourcing industry, outsourcing KPO. So if you have any family members or you have relatives who work in the outsourcing company. Okay. And I also like to know, give me a heart sign if you have any family member or relative who used to work in Clark Air Base, whether a civilian employee or a military, or has a family who work in the Clark Air Base. So that's pretty long time ago. Some of you haven't been born yet. So magkwentuhan lang tayo today because in my topic today, I think some of it have been covered by Mr. Zoleta earlier. But what I'm going to talk about would be a little background to give you context of why Central Luzon, why Clark, and then we shift to the different policies that were created in support for our growth. Can you please move on to slide number 2? I think it's Elijah, right? Who's doing the slides. Okay. All right. So for slide 2, so the BPO industry growth in the central, specifically in Central Luzon, is a prime example why the Philippine government has successfully pushed for a regional diversification outside Metro Manila. It was mentioned earlier in the presentation that some of the congestion is being done right now in decongest Metro Manila. So the key highlights of the Center of Development of Clark and Pampanga and other parts of Central Luzon like Bulacan, Tarlac, okay, as the major outsourcing hubs. So I'm going to talk about the key BPO highlights in Central Luzon because it has one, strategic location, number 2, the available talent pool, and of course, the government support. It has given a lot of support for the different economic zones that were created to become one of the country's most vital next wave cities. So it's really more of the BPO side. So number 1 is the emergence of the Clark Special Economic Zone. So when the Pinatubo erupted, you know, the Americans left. And many people were so afraid, especially people coming from Angeles City, Mabalacat, Tarlac, because they have many family members who were working in the Clark Air Base. They said there will be no development. But if you look at it, if you search the internet, look for other old pictures. But if you ask people who are really living in Angeles City, surrounding Clark, Mabalacat, Tarlac, if you compare those times with what we have right now, it's significantly different. So it is a disputed primary driver for BPO in Central Luzon. It's really in Clark. The existing world-class infrastructure, access to international airport, and of course the status as economic zone made it a possible choice. It's a natural choice for major locators. Other than that would be the less floodings that's happening. Clark has a very high elevation compared to San Fernando, compared to Metro Manila, and of course Bulacan. Although in the past few months we've been uh, experiencing sudden floods, but that's not really happening inside Clark. The best time to recruit for us is during flood season because many people are frustrated and they would want to relocate in Clark. The number two, it would be the gateway. The gateway because Pampanga is now the second largest provincial BPO transaction hub in the Philippines after Cebu. Imagine that. It's Pampanga after Cebu, driven by its proximity to Metro Manila, by expressway like NLEX, and mature infrastructure in Clark. Sa Manila, you would need to look at your calendar to travel from one place to another. But for Clark, you're just looking at your watch. It's either 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes travel. And of course, the third one would be the centralization success, which it means the expansion aligns perfectly with the national IT BPM roadmap, which aims to have a significant portion of new jobs created outside Metro Manila to foster inclusive growth in the countryside. Let's move on to slide 3, please. Can you see the slide? Yeah. So we have major multinational BPO locators. In this slide, you will see a lot of outsourcing companies that started building their presence in Clark, specifically in Whole Central Luzon. It attracted major players, signaling readiness and competitiveness. So I started my career back in 1999, back at AOL, America Online. So that was the first one, and then we went to have the Cyber City, which became iCore now. And then there's a lot. We have Alorica, we have Cytel, now it's called for Found Ever, we have Task Us. So a lot of these big companies. And then eventually there are smaller BPOs because the big BPOs would cater to Fortune 500 companies. But the smaller BPOs, example, the Australian BPOs that you see along the road going to UP, like BPO, Travel and Leisure, Shore 360, TOA, they cater to small, medium enterprises, companies in Australia, New Zealand, UK. So they came in around 2020. So that happened. So the outsourcing companies have significantly given a lot of economic boom in Central Luzon. So let's move on to slide number 4. So for the third one would be the PESA registered IT Parks and Center. So we have the Philippine Economic Zone Authority area, which is the fundamental reason why it became an attractive. Because number one, we became an investment magnet, meaning PESA designated several IT parks and centers around Clark, surrounding areas like Angeles City and Subic. They allow BPO firms to avail crucial tax deductions and tax incentives. That is a big plus, including importations of example computers with tax-free or VAT-free. So they'd enjoy income tax holidays, 5% gross income tax rate. So that is significant. And then number 2 would be the infrastructure synergy. So these parks ensure the necessary reliable telecommunications infrastructure, power supply. So in the past few years, Clark has become, well, the manufacturing industry and the whole lot of investors and locators inside Clark and in other Pampanga. One of the highest um, electric rate or consumption in utility would be Philippines, no? So napakalaki-laki ng bill sa kuryente, and companies do not get tax deductions. But there were a recent thing that happened, which is the Create Part 2, which became helpful for all locators, all companies, not just the BPO, but also the manufacturing. So at least that's one of the reasons why manufacturing is becoming lower, because the cost of doing business is very high, significantly high, and it's very difficult inside Clark and, of course, Central Luzon and probably the whole Philippines. So let's move on to slide number 5. For slide number 5, there is an impact on regional employment and economy. This is pretty obvious because there is a job creation. It created hundreds and thousands of direct and indirect jobs offering competitive wages and career paths, particularly for college graduates, helping to stem the tide of internal migration to already saturated Metro Manila. Example for me, I am a registered nurse by profession, but I moved to the outsourcing company doing a lot of HR work, admin work, until eventually, there's a lot of work that is available, that became available. So whoever is present, whoever is willing to shift or move on to their careers or try another one, it is available. And of course, we cannot deny the fact that there is a real estate driver. So the BPO demanded has become the main driver for quality office real estate and commercial development in Pampanga and Clark. Just imagine in 1999, the lease rate for per square meter was only 20 cents, meaning in dollars, 20 cents. Right now, the average is 12 to $14 per square meter. So napakalaki. No? So it's really a real estate. So let's move on to slide 6, please. So we're going to talk about the Philippine government policies in the last 30 years. These have been the single most crucial factor in transforming Central Luzon from a region, recovering from the loss of the U.S. military bases, and of course, what happened with the Pinatubo eruption, to a major outsourcing hub, particularly centered in Clark, Pampanga. So the effects of these policies can be categorized into three. So the first one would be the geographic decentralization. Number two would be the fiscal incentives. And then number three would be the workforce flexibility. Let's move on to slide 7, please. So for slide 7, so the first one would be the geographic decentralization and infrastructure focus. So the government policies strategically use the former US military bases and installation to create an ideal investment destination. Number one, as you can see, it is zoned out. It is, well, highly secured. We really do not hear a lot of robberies and thefts going inside the zone. It's practically safe. Even the graft and corruption, when you uh, take care of permits and compliances, there's literally up to zero, except when the national governments come in, there are some graft and corruption under the table. But basically, when we do business with Clark Development Corporation and other SBMA, it is straight. There's no hanky panky. There's no monkey business happening. So, well, that is as far as my experience is concerned. Now we have the Basis Conversion and Development Act that was enacted in 1992 and the Clark Development Corporation. So this was the reason why Clark is transformed from a U.S. military basis to an economic zone. So the law converted it, and the CDC is the managing agency. It's the governing body that oversees everything inside Clark. So other than that, CDC these days is not really focusing on the manufacturing industry. It's focusing more on the tourism. So that's sad. So slide number 8, please. For slide number 8, there is the Philippine Economic Zone Authority, or the PEZA endorsements. So with this became the landmark legislation in creating, primarily focusing on attracting foreign investors, simply because of a lot of tax incentives. No, they're facilitating a lot of business operations. Even even if the whole thing, example, Rolls Royce was not as manufactured here, but some of the parts are manufactured here, and they would export it and assemble it. Okay, for example, Coach bags. Some parts of the Coach bags, they are high-end brand, but it's not fully manufactured here. So they just manufacture some parts and then they export it, and then sa US or sa Europe na sila tinatatak. So that happens because one would be the raw materials being imported from China. So because of the tax incentive, companies would have a lot of savings in those. So there's a lot of incentive. And then of course there is also a tax holiday for a period of time. And then there are also preferential taxes. Example, 5% for gross income tax, tax-free and duty-free importations, as I mentioned before, and of course, other non-fiscal incentives like simplified import and export procedures and special non-immigrant visas for foreign employees. Example, I am an expatriate, I work for a company inside Clark, or I am an investor, there is a special visa being given to them, so it's easier for them to move in and out of the country. And then, of course, in the early 2000s, right, I think that was the time of Rojas, Manuel Rojas. So make it Philippines. So make it Philippines. That was the campaign. So it focused on the active marketing and promotions of the Philippines as the premier destination for IT BPO services. So the early 2000s, that is where all banks, no, from JP Morgan, Citibank, a lot of the US based Fortune 500 companies went to the Philippines to outsource some of the work. Okay, so this initiative helped position the country on the global outsourcing map. Now let's move on to slide 9, please. For slide 9, we're discussing the infrastructure development. So there is a lot of improvement in terms of the connectivity. There's continued investment. Example, for all roads like the NLEX, as the SLEX, it significantly reduced the time in traveling to and from Subic and Manila. Okay, and this made Central Luzon a viable operational extension of the capital, ensuring business continuity and ease of talent movement. Yun nga lang, the other negative thing is that for any flights from Clark to or going from Clark, it's really higher. The fares are higher than if you take the flight in Manila. So the overall effect of this is that we're able to achieve a national goal of decentralization, establishing Central Luzon, specifically Pampanga, as one of the country's next wave cities attracting global BPOs. Let's move on to slide 10, please. So for slide 10, this is the fiscal and economic incentive policies. So these are the laws governing corporate taxation and investment offered, specifically financial incentives, compelling a lot of outsourcing companies to locate here in the region. And specifically, we have a lot more coming in, not just in Clark, but we have Tarlac, Angeles City, just outside, and then we also have some in Bulacan who are also building a lot of their outsourcing companies. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, the Special Economic Zone Act. So that guaranteed tax savings. Okay, and let's move on to slide 11. The slide 11 would tell us about the corporate recovery and tax incentive for enterprises. This is the CREATE law. So there was one that was sent out during the Duterte administration, but that caused a lot of frustrations, no, a lot of negativity, specifically for locators. Kasi bigla inalis yung incentive, bigla inalis yung VAT, ang dami-daming nalis. So what they did is a lot of locators inside Clark, even the outsourcing industry, the ITBPAP, created a lot of lobbying, a lot of advocacies in changing or improving. So CREATE law. So that was launched early this year. Now, dun sa nilaunch nilang bago, dun when it was launched, that was a good news for many manufacturing companies because electric expenses, their utilities, are now tax deductible. So a lot of those happened in the last few months. So these incentives, okay, provided financial cushions that the BPOs used to justify large-scale capital investment in Central Luzon. So not just the BPO, basically all kinds of industries that are located inside the zone, specifically manufacturing. Also, some areas like in aviation too, they are now enjoying that. So with that one, it led to a high value. Until now, it's leading a high job creation and significant boost in the region's GDP. Now let's move on to slide 12. For slide 12, workforce and operational flexibility. So there's a lot of adjustments that were made, specifically right after the pandemic. There's a lot of shifting of policies, specifically working from home. And I think, moving to 2022, the government, specifically under the Department of Finance, and FIRB, suddenly remove work from home privileges. So we were threatened by not by the incentives that we were enjoying to be removed if we don't ask people to come back to work. So what happened? They created a lot of frustrations among uh, employees, okay, especially high value employees, meaning those employees with high skills, no knowledge processing outsourcing. So what happened was that there was a shift, there was a disruption that happened, but without this, everything was great. But what happened was that because of the advocacies of the ITBPAP and a lot of industries, so there was a work with the Board of Investments to grant exemptions to selected employees or selected companies to continue allowing people to work from home or do hybrid work. And slide 13. So as I mentioned earlier, there was an institutionalized flexible work na. Meron na siya. So example, 50% of the people can now work from home, but that is always dependent on the number or the total investments that a company can give to the local government. So there are still a lot of conditions to be able to enjoy that one. But with that one, the advantage is that we are able to attract a lot of talent. Example, in the companies that I work for, I have people now who I recruit not just within Central Luzon. I have staff who are living in Zamboanga, Davao, Ilocos, even if the company is located here in Central Luzon. So we were able to open a lot of opportunities for other people in other regions. So the overall effect of this is that it became more attractive for local workforce instead of commuting. People or the workforce became more resilient, and companies have accommodated it and embraced it. So in this slide 14, what is coming? Okay, so in the IT BPO industry created the IT BPO roadmap. It is policy focused, meaning there's a lot of lobbying, a lot of meetings with the government, a lot of tripartite councils that will be consulted upon. So these are multi-year plans developed in collaboration with the BPAP. Okay, the ITBPAP is the Information Technology Business Processing Association of the Philippines. They set a strategic goals for employment, revenue generation, skills development. They guided government and private sectors to and efforts to sustain growth and move up the value chain toward the higher value services, which we call the knowledge processing outsourcing. So hindi na lang siya customer service. It was mentioned earlier by Mr. Toleta that the AI the AI and gives a lot of threats to the industry. But what mandates right now is the deliberate shift towards knowledge processing outsourcing than the business processing back process BPO. Okay, thus for Central Luzon, this means a large talent pool special into specialized higher value. So slide 15. So what is the future outlook? So the future outlook specifically for AI and automation. So one, there is a central challenge because the rise of AI and robotic processes automation presents great threat to the core sector, specifically example those who are doing voice, no? Like call centers, because the Philippines dominates in the global market in voice-based services. As you mentioned earlier in our first speaker, we have a neutral accent, but unfortunately, these are most vulnerable to the automation. As you can see, we also see deep fakes, um, so this is just also a reminder, if you don't know the numbers calling you, better not answer it. Kasi kung importante yan, they'll send a text because they can always use your voice. Okay, so number two would be the strategy in upskilling and moving up the value chain, meaning there are really jobs that will be obsolete and moving on to other jobs. So kahit na may mawawala, may bago naman. That's why it's really important, especially for all of you who are still students, to open your minds, okay? Open your eyes on what's happening, what are the opportunities in the future. Be flexible enough to learn, okay? Because in our life, learning never ends. So for the strategy in surviving this, we need to go to a uh, to something that we're able to handle because not all work can be done by AI. Okay. So we need example AI trainers, prompt engineers, we need data science and analytics. We also need people who will work under the healthcare information and management. And of course, we also need to focus on government industry collaborations with the upscaling programs, improving curriculums, improving or incentivizing the academe to continuously upskill all professors or teachers or vocational courses, okay, to expand the knowledge. And of course, the key operational and policy changes that are happening will still be continuously reviewed, evaluated, and probably changed. Okay, example, the hybrid work policy. As you can see in the news, a lot of companies now are moving to full-time work. Hindi na hybrid, hindi na work from home. A lot of global companies. That's why in Metro Manila and even in Central Luzon, some of the vacancies that we have in terms of occupancy rate with offices, buildings are slowly going back. Because kahit na sinabi ni Trump, okay, make America great again, just focus on the US, the American call centers must stay in the US, okay, work must stay in the US. Ang problem nga, most of the people who are working in the call centers or in the outsourcing companies in the US are migrants. Okay? They're all immigrants. Even in example in New York during pandemic, ang dami niyang pinadeport. Those are working in the hospitality industry. And right now, a lot of business owners, restaurants are closing or limiting their work because wala namang immigrant. So there's still a lot of opportunities because it's not just US, no? The Philippines can still open to other markets like Europe, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East. And of course, the infrastructure and talent drain. So regional hubs like us, okay, must consistently upgrade our internet, our power infrastructure, and of course, looking at the rising local wages would still need to be considered because we need to provide value. Kahit na mataas ang sweldo natin, if we have provided a lot of value, then people will retain us. Okay, so we hope that the Central Luzon will still be the next wave of cities, and the future BPO sector in Central Luzon and then of course in the Philippines is not about defending low-cost voice jobs, but leading the transition AI supported high value digital services. Okay, so I think that ends. My last would be thank you for inviting me in this talk, and I hope you learned something. Back to you.
Thank you for that comprehensive discussion on the BPO sector, Ms. Remy. We now open the floor for questions.
Oh, some question here from Amado Sabio. How are we doing in terms of BPO service to the Nordic and more broadly EU markets? Will that help us if the US market pulls away from US non? Thank you for that question. Example for the US for the Nordic side. The thing that needs to be done specifically in the legislation, in advocacy, in the work of diplomatic areas, we need to have someone who have a very strong alliances with the European market, with European companies, specifically because they have different policies than the US. Okay, they have example in Poland. They want to recruit a lot of Filipino talents, but the thing is, they don't speak English. So for us to be able to be out there, we need to be open enough to learn another language. It can be Spanish, French, Polish. We need to have that openness to be able to continuously put ourselves forward and be competitive. Okay, so I think that answers. I hope that answers your question. So it's not just the US. We have a lot also, like in Japan, and there's a lot. And then number two, I had some relatives who had experienced the fly-by-night BPOs back. Yes, I'm pretty sure. Are they still present today? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, pretty much yes. Number one, you have to make your due diligence in applying for a company. You have to have that patience enough and do the research, ask about that outsourcing company. Even looking at their SEC registration is free. You can always ask. Because one example, the recent one, it's always coming back. Lagi silang bumabalik. They're Israel, um, I think Israel-led companies. They do a lot of scam. They're not just the Pogos. They do love scams. A lot. They're doing a lot. But your responsibility is to be able to do due diligence. And also, once you're not aware and you're inside the company already, and you start feeling that what you're doing is not legal, you always have the option to go out and resign. Yung iba hindi eh. Nasisilaw sila sa pera. So I've had a lot of colleagues who talked to me or have reached out to help to provide them legal counsel simply because inaresto sila. They were part of the scams. Which sadly, they had the option to move, but they didn't. But it's really up to you to find out if they are compliant with the permits, even specifically employee benefits. Yung simple na lang, SS Pag-ibig PhilHealth, do they pay on time? So those are simple. Okay? So I hope that helps. Next. If China goes to war in Taiwan or even with us, how affected would the BPO sector be? Is the BPO sector prepared and insulated? Most BPO companies, specifically for those with exposure to global markets, uh, BPO companies who are affiliated with global companies, not the smaller BPOs, we are able to design a business continuity plan. That's why it's for global companies to accept Trump's example, those who in the US, Trump's mandate. It's not acceptable for them because whatever happens to one country, they can always find redundancies. They always need to find uh, a BCP plan, a business continuity plan, to be able to continuously provide services to their members, to their clients. I think for us, even if it's if there's a war that's happening with the setup of remote, I think there's more chance for us to survive if that happens. And we will pray that that won't. Okay, we will pray that won't happen. Compared to
Miss
BPO
Remy,
rivals, yes.
oh, sorry to cut you off, Miss Remy, because I really would leave soon. But this is an interesting question for me, as I work with the BPO for almost 12 years of my life with JP Morgan and State Street.
Yes.
So, as of now, I know Clark have Boulder Philippines, which is I know is a fund accounting client. They have. Do we have like more interest from this BPO, like financial institutions like pension funds and etc. to set up like KPO in Clark? Because that is the next move. Eh.
Yes.
I'll just
Yes.
give you
Yes.
a quick number here, Mano. When I was
Yes.
working in Clark Outsource, sorry, Alorica now, way back it's called, I forgot the name, PhilExcel area, Emiros.
Yes. Alorica.
Alorica now, way back before 2010, my salary is 14,000.
Yep.
In KPO, the level entries, they're paying around 40 to 50. If you're really
Correct.
good and extremely good. So there's a high premium. So
Mhm.
kasi as I mentioned before, the call center job will suddenly lose because of our neutral accent can be replicated, right? So this fund accounting, it's hard to replicate because of legislations from the US. It needed to be done by a people, not by AI. So do we have interest coming from, foreigners saying that I wanted to set up a KPO
Mm.
here in Clark?
Okay. Thank you for that question. Number one, whenever there is a global company who would want to set up that type of business, specifically in the fintech or finance company, they would have to look at the infrastructure. What are the
Mhm.
available infrastructure? Number two, they have to work with example consultancy, management consultancy. They have to get um, a recruitment report. It's a recruitment
Mhm.
report to see how many talents are available in to do that specific jobs. Now, it always go back to infrastructure because for jobs, for people that can always be trained, people can always be trained, no? But for the
Relocated,
infrastructure,
etc.
specifically policies also, no? In my experience, I always have a lot of frustrations and heartache when I talk to CDC. But, there's still a lot of opportunities there. They would want example if I am fintech company, will I be able to implement a very secured secured company for the site,
Yeah,
would I be able to find talents who are really have
good.
high integrity, okay, have high accountability? So they do that in my experience in the past. Example, in America Online, we have a group who would do uh, a background check.
Uh-huh.
Para kami may, even if they're agents, even if we have those, yeah. Isa-isa sa amin meron. So that
Yeah, yeah.
high level of
Security
background
clearance.
check, oo,
Correct.
ginagawa nila. So other than that example, we had problems recently with Amazon Web Services. What happened? I'll tell you a little something about Amazon Web Services or Google Workspace or anything that is cloud-based. Example, Australia, is in telco. Their data should not leave Australia. They should
Yeah,
not go to the Philippines. Now, how can we get that kind of job if that is the policy? So it
regulation.
helps to get a cloud-based services like AWS or cloud-based because it remains in the Australia
Yeah.
uh, in the Australian uh, territory. But simply because since the infrastructure was built, even if the job is remotely being done here, the client will not be able to see that, oh, it goes out of Australia, it goes to the no, it doesn't. They don't see that. So that is in the medical, telco, accounting, and other financial, and even software, cybersecurity industry that they work on that. So there are a lot of opportunities for that one. In fact, the opportunity is how can we make Philippines more visible in the outside market? Because
Yes,
a
yes.
lot of them are still not knowledgeable because they would prefer Philippines than India. They would prefer Philippines than India. They would prefer Philippines than Costa Rica. Okay,
Puerto
but
Rica.
eh, in the past few years, our high competitor right now, Philippines and Kenya, Philippines and South Africa. So yun yung kalaban natin ngayon. So for these types of job, high level jobs, these are still good. They're still coming in, but a lot of infrastructure, a lot of work needs to be done before it can actually be built.
Sorry, Mama. I'm just wondering because just based on my experience, Mama, JP Morgan is currently have 20,000, and based
Ah,
on what I heard from the industry, because I've been very have tight knit community with the KPO in banking and industry.
right.
JP Morgan is planning to build one more tower. Imagine the 8th Avenue Tower that we have, the
Mm.
the tower there. They
Yes.
will build one more, and they're planning to do two more.
Well, that's good.
That's the problem. The reason why I'm asking is that Metro Manila is really congested, and what I'm saying is that why don't we make Clark the next BGC in which we could attract HSBC, we
Yes.
could attract JP Morgan, we could
Yes.
attract
Yes. True.
this back office fund accounting,
Ah,
securities operations, and
ah.
etc. I don't know why Clark is not being
And
the destination aside from Manila.
ang totoo
That's a
kasi
question in my
niyan,
mind.
politics, sir. So,
Okay, okay,
kung
okay.
sino yung nakaupo,
So this
sinong
is really not an
visible.
infra question. It's really more of a
No. Yes, sir.
political question. Okay,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So,
okay.
ang mga clerk naman, even marketing, they're always out there. They're always out there. Ang problema lang, bandang huli, sinong nananalo? It's really the politics that's playing.
Sorry to ask so much question now, ma'am.
It's
But I
okay.
really appreciate your presence. Trish,
Ah,
I have to go because I have to take care of some of the
okay.
project with ADB.
Right.
But thank you, Ma'am Remy, for your
Thank
wonderful
you, sir.
presentation today.
Yours
Bye-bye
too.
po na.
Thank you. I learned a lot. Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Zoleta.
you so much po, Sir Aris. And I apologize for cutting you off po, Miss Remy. But
Yes.
due to time constraints, we have to enter Q&A portion muna po and move on to the next portion.
All right.
I'm
So
really sorry
thank you
po.
very much. I also need I'll be traveling after this, but I will listen to the next speaker, of course. Hindi lang ako magka-camera for the next speaker.
Before
Thank you
that,
once again po.
yes, before that, we would now like to present the certificate of appreciation to Ms. Remy Bakani Timbol for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation, and I really appreciate the invitation, the time, and most importantly, your presence. So sana may natutunan kayo. And please don't hesitate to connect me so I can answer some of the questions.
Yes, Ms. Remy, thank you po for shedding light on how policy frameworks have supported the BPO sector's success in Central Luzon.
Mm-mm.
Next,
Thank
we focus on another crucial pillar of Central Luzon's industrial ecosystem, the semiconductor industry.
So, to share his insights on how policies have shaped investments and innovation in this field, please welcome the HR Manager of Texas Instruments, Mr. Leon Carrion.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just checking if my audio is on, okay.
Yes po, sir, it is very clear.
So due to the interest of time, I also want to respect everyone's time, and probably a lot of you are already tired. I would like to give my message a brief, very brief lang, no? I do not have any slides to share, but I wanted to discuss about what is entailed dun sa mismong semiconductor. But I'd like to formally and appropriately introduce myself. Siguro kulang ng konti. I'm the HR manager for Texas Instruments. I have 15 years experience combined manufacturing and HR. Before I moved to HR, I was actually running the manufacturing floor for about 6 years in Baguio. Same company, Texas Instruments, and then moved to HR, and then now in Pampanga. So a little bit about the Texas Instruments. We were created in 1979 during the time that Marcos signed some of the export processing zones in Mactan. Baguio was one of them, and nung bukas yung mismong export processing zone sa Baguio, Texas Instruments was one of the bigger companies, or actually siya yung first company na binuksan sa TI about 46 years ago. To address paano nagkakaroon ng mga investments ng semiconductor sa Pilipinas. Malaki yung part nung vision kasi nung time ng 1979, I think, when a few years after PEZA was created, malaking part nun is talaga may vision na magkaroon ng export processing zone. So we were trying to look for a lot of different ways to export yung mga products natin to outside. And one of them is actually yung mga semiconductor parts. Aside from the produce na ginagawa natin, yung mga ibang industries na meron tayo, services now more sa BPO, nila Ma'am Remy. But in the past, it was more of ano pa yung pwede natin ibigay, right? So at that time, I think meron tayong enough people, meron tayong sufficient number of good talents sa Pilipinas. Baguio at that time was actually a center of excellence in terms of education. So maraming talagang mga learned na mga tao. And hindi rin naman kaya sa atin na yung pag kunyari nasa Cordillera ka, malaki yung part ng merong English speaking community because of the history that we've had. So ito yung mga parang naging decision for Texas Instruments to invest in partnership with the Philippines in 1979. 30 years later, we started yung part ng pag-create ng Clark, Texas Instruments Clark dito sa Pampanga, and that's also in partnership with PEZA. So if you imagine the map of CBC in the entire Clark, yung maliit na butas sa gitna ng CBC is under PEZA and Texas Instruments yan. So to summarize yung mismong industry and the growth natin, we are continuously getting growth in terms of semiconductor field in the manufacturing because of yung mga incentives. People or large companies will go to the Philippines because of incentives. Imagine, pagpunta ko sa Pilipinas, what's in it for me? I'm a big company in the US. I'm producing multi-billion products. Ano ang dapat kong, bakit ako mag-invest sa Pilipinas? Malaking factor doon is tax incentives. Fiscal, eco-zones, yung mga ganong mga incentives na meron tayo. Regulation support, paano mas madali mag-apply ng mismong permit sa Pilipinas. Pag gumawa ako ng malaking building, 3-floor building sa Pilipinas, dadaan ba ako sa maraming process or meron akong makakatulong sa akin to ensure na magawa ko yung mismong the same time, labor market. We are always talking about the labor market. Dahil nga mura sa Pilipinas, may sinasabi na parang maraming pupunta dito dahil mura tayo magpasahod. And I think Sir Alice is no longer in the call, but I think he pointed out a good insight that other countries are already as competitive pagdating sa mismong labor market. While Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, possible na mas mataas pa rin yung yung cost in terms of labor. Yung mga Vietnam, Cambodia, and other neighboring countries natin are also still in the lower side of it. So kunyari ako galing sa US or galing ako sa European country, mag-invest ako ng malaking pera, would that go to the Philippines or to Malaysia or Indonesia, right? Some, like Texas Instruments, will bring facilities in Taiwan, in Malaysia. So meron kaming 4 na facilities sa Malaysia, 2 sa Philippines, and so on. But I think not everyone will do that. Yeah, depending kung ano yung pwede lang, what's in it for me, quote unquote. Um, so, um, so kung sali, for example, to help address yung mismo mga questions, like to generalize yung part niyan, ano yung pwede na maging challenge sa mga kabataan ngayon or sa mga students? Actually, I actually finished my master's degree in management sa UP Clark. So marami akong nakilalang good professors na nakapagturo, parang supplement ng mismong experience ko sa Texas Instruments. And I think yung isa sa mga pinakamagandang nakuha ko sa master's curriculum is yung competitive advantage. While it is actually something na ginagawa na namin in the background, it was solidified by the concepts na tinuturo ng UP. And I think bottom line, ano ba yung competitive advantage natin for us to be able to ride on the market, right? Daming issues ng US, may US CHIPS Act, they wanted to consolidate a lot of semiconductor part sa US, doon na lang gawin yung manufacturing and so on. There's also some dispute in terms of China-US partnership, the China-Taiwan relationship. I do not want to talk more about that, pero sa atin sa Pilipinas, ano yung magiging competitive advantage natin? What I think, and this is my personal opinion, we're lacking behind is the overall long-term vision in terms of addressing skill gaps, talent gaps ng mga tao. Sometimes, in terms of people, ang tingin kong opportunity for us is to have a good curriculum in terms of where we want to be, right? Wala tayong university na nag-focus sa semiconductor industry, even if it's the top exporters of the company. Not only for TI, we have Analog, Maxim, Amcor, NXP, ST Micro, and so on. Maraming semiconductor sa Pilipinas. And the problem is, kumukuha kami ng mga talent across the schools and iba-iba yung mga course na nakukuha namin. Mechanical for this, electronics for this, sometimes industrial engineering. Walang masyadong focus about, hey, mga universities, unlike in Taiwan and China, meron talaga mga universities na focus din sa mismong semiconductor part. The second is more of long-term vision in terms of addressing yung thin supply natin. Kasi, of course, to just share with you, top level, gumagawa tayo ng materials. So, gumagawa kami ng chips na nilalagay sa computers, nilalagay sa cellphones, nilalagay sa electronic devices, sa kotse, and so on. Pero saan namin kinukuha yung mismong raw materials na to? Yung mga gold bars namin, yung mga epoxy na ginagamit, these are actually imported from other countries as well. Wala halos tayo makuhang mga materials na nanggagaling sa Philippines. Like, for example, we use gold wires, copper wires, and so on. These are usually imported. Kung bibilin sa ibang bansa, dadalhin dito, tapos ipapadala palabas. So I think yun siguro yung isa rin sa mga magiging challenge in terms of yung overall continuity ng business, semiconductor particularly, pagdating sa future. So, yun din, siguro ang isang last part, ay siguro I'd like to summarize. One of the items na magandang i-address, or I think maganda rin na dumating, shinare ni Miss, ito ba siya? Miss Remy kanina, no? Yung sa part ng create and create more. So meron namang mga ginagawang initiatives yung mga yung government natin, yung mga laws pagdating sa part ng trying to incentivize. But I think there should be a lot of focus in the long term, para sa long term. Para pagdating ng vision, hindi lang para doon sa mismong current administration mo. We're actually looking for the next 10, 15, 20 years of the Philippines. Saan mo gustong mapunta yung Pilipinas? Saan tayo mag-invest ng talents? Whether it be in the industry, sa BPO, sa mining, sabi ni Sir Alice kanina, it will be very dependent on where we are best. Like, so, siguro may ahambing yan sa part na, kunyari, for example, pagdating sa basketball, right? Filipinos like basketball a lot, right? Pero, nananalo ba tayo sa ibang bansa pagdating sa part na yan? It might be a very different one, but I think that's something that we could learn from, learn na anong strengths natin, ano yung opportunities natin, and then I think that will be better and will help us definitely in the future sa country. That's all that I have. If there are any things that you'd like to clarify.
Thank you very much po, sir. So there is a question from John Hans. Sir Gayon, so glad DI has been in the Philippines for so long. It has employed many of my friends and connections, but it will always stay back regardless of Trump's anti-globalist policies.
I think that's actually a very good question. No? If we'd look at yung mismong flow ng government ng US, sobrang dami na rin nag-change over the past 46 years. And I think the company is here to stay. And merong ding mga vision yung mga leaders ng Texas Instruments particularly to really invest in the Philippines. Anong nag-hold sa atin doon sa part na yan? What I mentioned, what is parang kumbaga kasi nakapasok na ang TI sa ano no. Unless mag-create tayo ng bagong buildings, mag-create tayo ng bagong factories and facilities in the Philippines, those tax incentives and fiscal incentives are no longer there. For example, just throwing out, no, kunyari magkakaroon tayo ng discount pagdating sa electricity, sa kuryente, right? Kasama kasi yan sa mga incentive, no? So kunyari, for example, you will have 10, 15 years or 20 years na medyo may discount ka sa kuryente. After that expires, wala na. We could always say na the return of investment naman na, pero again, for future expansions, paano mas mahihikayat yung mga companies to continue investing. But going back to the question, I think yes, marami yung vision na to is actually something that we could learn from. Na medyo flexible yung mismong company and siguro dahil multi-source din yung mismong mga sites, may mga magagandang partnership pa rin in the same. So malaking bagay yan. Okay, I think there's another question. Past industrial policies have focused on incentive and export zones. Do you think that is still enough for Semicon today? Do we need a more strategic tech-driven approach to compete globally? As much as I would want to say na talagang maganda yung tech-driven approach, no, I think it requires a lot of capital. And capital requires a lot of money and a lot of resource. I would want to give parang magandang meron tayo ganyan. So but I would like to also be honest on what our capabilities are. I think we should invest in the people first. Right? For example, kung mahanap tayo ng mismong mga gantong skill set, let's create that skill set right here sa ating sa school. Simulan natin. If we want competitiveness, let's broaden yung mismong yung mga tinuturo sa eskwelahan, yung mismong magiging aggressiveness in terms of learning, para at least matutunan natin kung anong dapat natin gawin, right? And we've talked about AI. I think a lot of part noon is people learning the AI. How do we compete with India? How do we compete with China? These countries are very much ahead in terms of this, no? So I think it's more of us first. Ayusin muna natin yung self natin, then same time let's try to do our best in pushing yung mga regulations na to either sa eskwela, sa labas, sa kalsada, or sa mismo companies na pinagagalaw natin. But also on the sa other part of it, kunyari, for example, in Texas Instruments Semiconductor, meron kami mga chips, meron kami mga products na nagsusupport din sa mismong AI growth. So yung mga investment namin ngayon, for example, for Clark, naka-tie up dun sa part ng mga personal devices or sa mga electronic devices that has something to do with AI. For us, what we need to do is to ensure that the quality is there. The Filipino part is there. Pag gumawa tayo ng trabaho, tayo ang pupuntahan, sa atin mag-order yung mga tao. When that is done, dun sa part na yun, I think it's also going to give us a competitive advantage. Even us in Texas Instruments, we also have to fight for demand. Sabihin, kunyari ako yung mismo na sa US, saan ko lalagay itong order na to? Sa China ba? Sa Malaysia ba? Sa Philippines ba? Kung pangit ang quality na ginagawa ng Philippines, probably they will divert yung mismong products elsewhere. Kung mabagal tayo gumawa ng products na yan, they will also divert those orders elsewhere. Because of course, we have to be very competitive. And I think yung pinakamalaking doon is tayo, right? So I think, but the bottom line, going back to the question, I think yes, makakatulong pa rin yung industrial policies to ensure that there is continuity. Yung kumbaga, if I will term it simpler, loyalty. Paano mo magkakaroon ng incentives in terms of loyalty. If you're here for 50 years, 60 years, and so on, ano pa yung pwede mo maging incentive? I think that is something that pwedeng magawa ng ano. Paano mapapabilis yung expansion, lalo na kung nagkaroon ka na ng investment, baka meron karoon ng mga partner additional na support when it comes to just expanding, not creating a new facility. Tech-driven approach, yes, I think para more on the soft skills. The hard, yung mga mismong machineries, I think it requires more time.
For the next question po from Kate Lazo, question for Sir Leon. What looming external and internal threats pose the greatest risk to the sustained growth and competitiveness of the semiconductor industry in the Central Luzon HESA zones of over the next 5 years?
I think yun, babalik dun tayo dun sa part ng complacency in terms of sa part ng education, sa mismo aggressiveness natin in the Philippines. I hope I'm answering, no? Yung looming external and internal threats pose, no? Kunyari, for example, magmahal ang kuryente, magmahal yung facilities, utilities natin, tubig, kuryente, no? Ang mangyayari nun is, even if we are competitive doon sa mismong labor workforce, mura ang sahod ng mga Pilipino kumpara sa Malaysia, for example. Pero malaki yung binibigay ng Malaysia doon sa part ng incentive pagdating sa part ng utilities. Nagbabalance out din lang yung mismong cost para sa mga external multinational companies. So, kumbaga meron kang bibilan na dalawang tindahan, saka pupunta doon sa mas mabilis, mas mura, mas maganda kumpara doon sa isa, right? So, I think it goes back to the vision, people, and policies. So, doon pa rin tayo babalik.
Thank you, sir. And for our last question from Prof. Remy, do you think the U.S. CHIPS and Science Act is still going to benefit the Philippines, or has the transition from Biden to Trump basically wiped the potential benefits of that policy direction out?
I think, thank you, sir, for the question. I think it is a very interesting item. I think I would like to answer it in a way na this is still ongoing. Marami pang nangyayari. And I think marami rin part sa mismong internal naman na nag-discuss about its impact to the Philippines, to China, and so on. Definitely, there is no straight answer if it will be beneficial for us. Maraming kailangan gawin pagdating doon sa part ng competitive advantage. Siguro as cliche that may sound, nasa atin yung mismong wala. How we navigate through yung mismong discussions dun sa part ng pag-push na meron pa rin tayong mga US companies na nakabase pa rin sa Philippines. I don't think they're going anywhere. Kasi yung mismong CHIPS Act, some part of it is saying na kailangan nakacentralize pa rin dun sa part nung sa kanila, babalik at babalik sa kanila. And so, kunyari, for example, sa amin, we are still using it as a leverage because we are an American company. So marami pa rin doon sa mismong kita natin while it's going to the GDP of the Philippines, export and so on, still goes back to the US. And that is actually overall US performance. I think for some countries like China, meron siyang difficulty. Like for example, may mga closure in terms of, hey, paano gagawin? So yun siguro yung isang advantage din natin, disadvantage ng China. Some of the demands or orders will be diverted from China to the Philippines. So it depends. It might probably depend. Although I'm not, I think yung mga discussion about Biden to Trump, possible, pero I think meron pang mga ongoing discussions for it. So I'm not as an expert pagdating sa part na yun, but I think that's my insight.
Thank you, Sir Rion, and for the participants for that very engaging discussion.
To recognize our semiconductor industry speaker, we now present the certificate of appreciation to Mr. Ryan Carion.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate the time and alam ko nag-extend tayo, but I thank you everyone. Thank you rin, sir.
Thank you once again, Paul, for your very meaningful contribution to our dialogue on industrial policy and regional growth. Despite the time constraints, we were able to learn a lot from your comprehensive background about the semiconductor industry.
As we come to the conclusion of tonight's forum, let's take a moment to reflect on the discussions we've had. Over the past 2 hours, we explored how Philippine industry policy from 1965 up to today has shaped the economic landscape of Central Luzon.
So we heard how the region's growth was influenced by both planned strategies and reactive responses from export processing zones and infrastructure projects, the ecozone expansions and the rise of key industries like BPO, semiconductors, and shipbuilding.
With that, we extend our deepest gratitude to our distinguished speakers for sharing their insights and expertise with us tonight. Thank you as well to everyone who joined and participated in our discussion. Your presence made this forum meaningful and engaging.
We would also like to acknowledge the efforts of our organizing team, Pangkat Mapulon, for their hard work in putting this event together. And with that, let us all welcome the leader behind this event, Ms. Angel Sibog, for her closing remarks.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Pangkat Mapulon, I'd like to sincerely thank our speakers, Sir Aris, Sir Rion, Ma'am Remy, and our moderator, Professor Remy De Leon, and all of you who join us tonight. We've looked back on 6 decades of industrial policy, and what became clear is that industrial development isn't just about policies or projects. It's about how people, industries, and regions like Central Luzon evolve together. Before we officially close, we would like to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to Professor Remy De Leon, our instructor and mentor, for his invaluable guidance throughout the planning of this forum. His insights and encouragement have truly shaped today's discussion. With that, we present the Certificate of Appreciation to Professor Remy in recognition of his unwavering support and commitment. As we end tonight's program, I hope this forum sparks deeper reflection on how we can build an industrial future that's not only globally competitive, but proudly and inclusively Filipino. Thank you again for being part of this discourse and for helping us rethink what it means to build beyond borders. Maraming salamat and have a great evening, everyone.
Once again, thank you everyone for joining Building Beyond Borders, Rethinking Industrial Development in Central Luzon.
We hope tonight's discussion helps us rethink how policy, innovation, and regional growth can go hand in hand. But before that, let's have a picture taking muna po. So we all please turn on our cameras. May nagpipicture na ba? Sige, bilang ako. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Ayun. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been Cheese.
And I'm Karel, your host for tonight's forum. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye.